All right, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We have Robin Gray with us, and she graciously offered to talk to our group about unemployment in the CARES Act. As I said, you are muted upon entry, and we ask you to use the chat feature whenever you have a question. You can find that at the bottom of the screen, and it'll pop up on the side. Robin will address it, as she's going through the presentation or at the end of the presentation. And with that said, Robin, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining in. And again, my name is Robin Gray. I'm an attorney in Pennsylvania, licensed also in Maryland, PA, and New York, and Jersey. So I always say I'm dangerous in 4 states. But today we're going to talk about the CARES Act and unemployment, which is very near and dear to everyone right now, especially during this pandemic. The United States Department of Labor, through the government, and everyone has been watching. Obviously, we're paying attention to new funds that are available for businesses, small businesses, self-employed, and the CARES Act extends a lot of the benefits for unemployment to people who may not have otherwise qualified, as well as extending amounts of money and length of time. And what makes it interesting under the CARES Act, it's federal money, but still under state laws. And we'll talk about that and how that is complicating some things and trying to keep politics out of everything between states and federal government and trying to negotiate contracts. But we'll discuss that a little later. Anyway, under the CARES Act, there's 2 programs that for the unemployment. One is the federal pandemic unemployment compensation, and the other is then pandemic emergency assistance, unemployment assistance. What the federal pandemic deals with the $600 extra a week that people heard about, as well as W-2 workers and who apply and who would qualify for that. So the extra $600 payments, again, which were negotiated and approved, will go on after the state will qualify you for the amount of money you're supposed to receive under normal calculation. Then an additional $600 is put onto your amount of money. And that will end, that's up until July 30th, 2020. It will not go past that point, but you do get that additional $600 benefit. And the people, it's available from the time where the employment starting date, again, up until July 31st, 2020. And this is, again, 100% federally funded. The state is not, it's not state funds that are using it. This is the federal money. Or I like to say your tax dollars are finally working for you. But now the states also must notify you of your entitlement under the FPUC. So you go ahead and you would file with the state. After you file with the state, they'll let you know if you qualify or not for this additional $600. And it will either be paid, and again, this is up to the state, it's either going to be paid at the same time as you get your benefit or in a separate payment. And again, it depends on how the states are going to handle it. There's not a lot of guidance right now from Pennsylvania on how they're doing it. In fact, right now, Pennsylvania doesn't have a lot of guidance on anything except if you're in this category, you can apply for your unemployment. Some people are getting it, some people aren't. I think the system's bogged down and they're just having trouble processing who qualifies and who doesn't. But again, it also will extend out your benefits. So if it's even to the point where if you're collecting, let's say if you're collecting now, your benefits will also extend out to this time period and you will get that extra $600. So again, this is basically your normal employment W-2 worker filing for unemployment because you lost your job due to the pandemic. And now you're being awarded an additional $600 and an extension of weeks that you will receive. I believe the extension of weeks, if you would end, still goes out to that additional time to July 31st, 2020, if you're not otherwise back to work. So again, that's the easy part. of the CARES Act. The fun part now is the pandemic unemployment assistance. And that has to do with, especially if you're self-employed. And there's a whole bunch of individuals, it's self-employed and other individuals who may not have otherwise been qualified. Let's say if you quit your job instead of being terminated. Normally under normal unemployment, you have to be terminated or laid off, but without cause. The new PUA, as they call it, actually deals with if you would quit your job or otherwise can't work, that would not normally be a reason to collect unemployment under other circumstances. So right now, who's eligible for a PUA, it talks about an individual, again, who's quit their job directly as related to the virus. And, they've been diagnosed with the virus if they're continuing to work, but somehow it's not possible that they can continue. Let's say if you're working from home or like a telemarketer and you can work from home. Now you're sick and you can't work because you're sick. Now you would qualify for the unemployment. Another one would be, let's say if you're providing care for a family member. Let's say your child's out of school and now you can't possibly work because you have to take care of your child. Obviously the daycares are closed. You can't have a babysitter. No one else can come in your house. So now you have to work because your child's out of school. You would qualify under this PUA. If someone's a primary caregiver, taking care of a family member, an elderly person, same thing. You would qualify because you can't work because you have to take care of that family member. And otherwise you can't work from home. If there's some reason that you can't reach your place of employment, we were talking earlier about crossing state lines. A lot of people in Pennsylvania go to Delaware or even Maryland to work. Well, right now, Delaware is not letting you in if you have out-of-state plates. They make you turn around or self-quarantine. So there's no way you could drive from, let's say, Chester County or Westchester to Wilmington to go work. So that you would qualify for the unemployment. If your immune system is somehow compromised with health conditions and that you've been provided that you have to self-quarantine for some reason. For example, I have friends, her husband actually has this and he's fighting for his life in the hospital. She has to self-quarantine. She works, but she has a mild case, but now she has to self-quarantine. So she can't work. So she will qualify now for the unemployment benefits. And if you're otherwise self-employed, you can't work your business. You have the emergency lockdown. You're not an essential worker. And so now you can apply for it. Now we're going through this entire list, but there's a lot of qualifications to this list. And this is where it becomes pretty complicated or confusing. One, under the PUA, it could be very short term. Let's say you have a child in school, a school-age child, and that child is now out of school. But let's say a miracle happens and they go back next month. Well, once that obligation ends, so does your unemployment. Now, and if it comes to the point where you don't have to self-quarantine anymore and you're cleared, okay, then your unemployment ends. So it is a short-term duration of this, and it will not extend no longer than December 31st, 2020, and I'll get into that in a little bit on some more of the qualifications. The sticking point's going to be if you're self-employed. They're still looking at how to determine a self-employed and whether they qualify for benefits. A lot of self-employed are sole proprietors. Well, as a sole proprietor, if you're not drawing a salary, you may not qualify because they're holding up some of the same standards. And again, this is in general, the same standards as you would have to look at to apply for unemployment benefits, such as a W-2 worker. So if you're not an LLC or otherwise incorporated in your business, and your business pays for everything, you may not qualify for the unemployment because you can't show the proper paperwork to show what your salary is for them to make a calculation. This is some of the stuff that we're still waiting on from Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania has provided no guidance right now. They're telling people self-employed not even to apply yet, which is causing a lot of problems. It's been 2 weeks and apparently they can't figure it out, or they haven't made their deal with the Department of Labor yet. I'm suspecting it's a little bit of both. Now, these are also the PUAs not generally available to anyone who is teleworking or, or somehow working from home. And if they're working their normal work week, they can't, and getting full pay, obviously they can't qualify. Now, if they're only getting partial pay, then they might be able to qualify for partial payment to make up for the difference or almost the difference under the PUA. Now, if you do qualify under the PUA and you apply now, it is retroactive. The states can retroactive this back to February 2nd. That's the start date of when they're determining when the emergency started to happen. So even if you apply, you can get retro payments back to February 2nd, and during the time that you are not working. Now, if your business gets up and running again, then, and you're starting to make money, then obviously, then you no longer qualify for the unemployment benefits. But they are extending this through December 31st, 2020. You can't make any claim for a benefit after that. So they are giving you some time to get your businesses back up and going to be able to collect. But again, you have to meet these qualifications. And while I'm droning on, if anyone has questions or wants to cut in and ask me questions as I'm going topic by topic, please feel free to do so. And they also have a difference of the week of unemployment, of what is defined by that. And the federal government is trying to give the states some guidelines on what a week of unemployment is. And it's kind of ends on different days of the week under different state laws, but they're usually looking at like a day or two difference, not weeks different. So in your week ending, you have to be able to show them, this is when I had to shut down the business, or this is when I could no longer work. And they are also getting rid of the week waiting period, like Pennsylvania has a week waiting period. They're getting rid of that under the CARES Act. So you don't have that waiting period any longer. And the problem is how they're going to be, the claims are going to be processed. Again, Pennsylvania they haven't come up with anything yet. I looked again today, and some people, I said, are getting the benefits right away, and some are not. I imagine that some of the benefits that are being approved faster are the ones that were the normal calculation and under the normal, under their normal criteria. When it gets into more of the PUA, you're not even supposed to apply yet. And even on the extension of the $600, I don't think they've come up with that yet. And like I said, we've also had, I said, I wish I knew more about what to do, I said with unemployment. Now, the one thing they've said that they modified their system, the payments. Now, what they're saying, Pennsylvania, I did find out that now Pennsylvania is making their payments on the $600 retro to week ending April 4th. So I don't know how they're going to get around that. And the federal government's saying it's longer. So I think there's going to be challenges to that. But that's Pennsylvania's retroactive date is back to April 4th. And also Pennsylvania wants to remind everyone that, you have to pay your federal 10% taxes on this money. So although it's taxpayer money, you have to pay taxes on whatever you're getting, including the $600 additional benefit. And Pennsylvania has said that the $600 additional pay will be paid if you have shared work time trade readjustment allowances, obviously under the PUA. So they are under the PUA, they're also paying the $600. So if you do qualify, besides what you would normally get under the calculation, you do get the additional $600. So that's kind of in a nutshell on some of the unemployment. And there were some questions earlier, and I see some questions on here as well. But some questions were posed earlier before we had the webinar about some of the loans too. So I can address that and then address everyone's questions, or however I guess people want to work on that. Now, there were questions, like I said, on the loans or on the loan forgiveness. And some of that has to do with, there was a question about how to bring back employees when there's a shelter-in-place in order. And on that, right now, you really can't bring them back until your business is allowed to reopen. And you do have that 8-week time period to do that. So until the states open it up, and this is where the federal and the states are still sort of at an impasse. Until the states open up that business, you can't bring the workers back to then qualify for maybe the loan forgiveness during that 8-week period that's discussed. So you still have to abide by the state guidelines. Hopefully they're going to start opening some things up. And they're talking about more testing to see who's immune, who's not, and maybe trying to kind of cordon some things off and compartmentalize areas instead of having a statewide quarantine. So that's what they're talking about. But right now, you can't bring any restaurant workers, you can't bring people back. Now, if there's still people on your payroll that you want to keep, for some reason that you can keep, that you're doing delivery or takeout, those people, then you would qualify under that scenario to, for some loan forgiveness. And if you need to bring people back again, in that, if you can do takeout or delivery and you have to bring people back, that's permitted, then you would be able to possibly get the, loan forgiveness. And Melissa, I think did you also present that this was a prior presentation?
Relating to
the short-term loans and the forgiveness.
Yes, we've had a few presentations, and we had an update this week on that as well.
Okay, that's what Hope had said. I just wanted to make sure. If I was misspeaking, fill in, because like I said, I prepared more of this on the unemployment, but I also looked at some of the short-term, on how the loan forgiveness was working.
Yeah, and the only thing I would correct it. You think you have it right. I mean, the goal is actually to pull people off of unemployment. So the internal, tongue in cheek is they don't care if you sit on the couch and don't work, as long as you're not getting paid unemployment for that and getting paid out of the P3. So that's kind of the incentive behind it for the loan forgiveness part of it. But yeah, we covered that on Wednesday, and as we continue to get more information on that, we'll provide more detail.
Okay, thanks. Like I said, that was some of the questions I received, and I wanted to make sure it was accurate. So now there's some questions that have come up that I think everyone can see about that unemployment is backed up. It is. And like I said, and you're correct, the 600 is supposed to come the week after your benefit is approved. Like I said, but they are backed up. And I think all the systems are just overwhelmed right now with everyone trying to apply. And the states just were not prepared, or the systems weren't prepared, or something wasn't prepared. But anyway, so they are very backed up. And they still haven't quite figured out what they want. And there's another question here about staff members who haven't received their PIN numbers and they can't get through. The only thing to do is keep trying to apply online and phone numbers. Eventually you will get through. It's just the system is just so backed up, to do anything. And like I said, I wish that there was more guidance on their website, and there really isn't. And that's always been a problem. And there's a question that, yes, and that was, there's a question about, to go back to the $600, if we can, are part-time employees who would have earned less than 600 still going to get the $600 payment? And part of the argument when they were coming up with this additional $600 payment was that people were actually going to end up making more money than they would have been otherwise. And that was part of the sticking point between congressional members and in the Senate on should this be allowed. And that was one of the holdups, and it went through, that some people are going to make more on unemployment right now than they would make working. And so even if they would have earned less than the 600, if they otherwise qualify, they're going to get that $600 payment. So they will get it. But again, if you do call them back to work, as Melissa said, the goal is to get people off unemployment, and they're trying to pay with these loans incentives for employers to keep people on, because it still will be cheaper and better to have people working than sitting on unemployment. However, if you can't call them back for state restrictions, you don't have, if for some reason they're not permitted at all to come back, then they will get that $600. And I think there's another question about addressing the employer unemployment rate issue, relief charges with related unemployment. Will the process be the same or special action to be taken? And that actually I have to look up. I did not see anything relating to that. But like I said, you saw the relief charges for related unemployment, there should not be any charges or any punishment to the state or the employer for having to collect the unemployment. Again, the federal government is paying for this unemployment, not the states, and it should not affect the employers or their uninsured or their unemployment insurance. This is strictly a state process in the the federal process, and the feds are funding this. This is all federal money. So, there should not be any unemployment, unemployment rate charge or relief, or anything for that. There may have to be a letter to show, if there's a specification, if you know from your employees that they receive their benefits as per the, for the CARES Act. And if you can prove that, then you won't be charged for that. And your insurance may require that, as well as the state, because some people may have been laid off anyway before this all happened. So you may have to, delineate, separate that out, but you will not be punished for this, because this is a federally funded program. And there's more questions. Hold on, I'm trying to catch up. And it's, again, enticing people back to work if they'll be making more unemployment. And again, if they are able to go back to work and you can offer them to come back to work, remember the state unemployment regulations, the basic principles of the unemployment still remain. If they were W-2 workers and you call them back to work and then they refuse and you have position for them, then that still falls under the state guidelines. So they can't just sit back and collect. If you actually have work for them and call them back and they say no, then that might be able to be challenged with the unemployment. They said, and this is again where some of the issues have come up. The basic state unemployment guidelines still remain. You still otherwise have to qualify. The only time it really comes into play differently is for the self-employed, or if there's extreme circumstances like having to take care of a child from school, or an elderly person that can't go to where, if you have an elderly parent that would otherwise have a caretaker come in or have to go to a facility while you're at work. But again, that's all short term. So, and even then, when you apply under those regulations, the normal state unemployment guidelines still apply to make that determination. So if you call back someone to work and they refuse, you might be able to then challenge their unemployment. Again, that's going to be something that's going to be in the work, and I can probably see there's going to be litigation on that as well. And some guidelines from Pennsylvania would be awesome if we would learn about some of that. But I think you would have a challenge if they refuse to come back and you have a legitimate job for them to come back to work. And there's a good statement here that, again, from Susan, that says it's important to review the monthly charges to make sure your account's not charged, and it should not be charged. Again, this is a separate account. And there's also, if you're not getting the paperwork because everything is overwhelmed about the charges for the unemployment compensation, try as much as you can to keep records. So when it does open up, you can show who's been charged, who's not, who was out on your unemployment, and then you can submit everything with stuff reopens up again. So I would, like I said, I think I've addressed a lot of the questions. If someone wants to chime in and ask without typing it in, that would be great. I love conversations. And if I did not get to someone's question, please let me know. I apologize. I'm scrolling through here to make sure that I've addressed everything. And I understand the frustration with getting through the office. The only thing you can do is keep trying. And I don't know if even reaching out to some of the state representatives would be appropriate to find out about the backlog. They may not have any answers either, but maybe putting pressure on them to try to get the unemployment office to get some things moving, and some pressure on the governor's office as a whole might not be a bad idea. So does anyone else have any other questions or something that they didn't understand or they want me to review further that I may have just glanced over that was of more important, you know, that you feel was more important that I need to spend more time on?
I did see there were 3 more questions that came through, Robin.
Okay, I'm looking.
Are we losing benefits?
I see them. Okay, thank you. We're losing benefits if we can't apply. No, you're not losing benefits. If you can't apply, that's their system's fault. And I would, if nothing else, keep track of when you started to apply, but you should not lose benefits because their system can't handle this. And that's why there's actually dates. And arguably, again, that's why there's dates with the federal that, I mean, the federal government's saying you can go back retroactive to February 2nd. The states can't deny that. So you should be able to go retroactive back to February 2nd unless you otherwise were working, you know, up until another point in March. But that's, the federal guidelines are saying you can go back retroactive, and the states have to pay you retroactively. So you would not be losing your benefits for that. And you're right. So that should work. And applying for the PUA right now, Pennsylvania has no guidance on applying for the PUA. Under the federal, and as Bernice just said, under the federal right now, you just apply. When they let you apply, you go through the regular process first. After you go through the regular process, they will probably deny you because under the regular process, you won't qualify. Then they'll let you know that you qualify for the PUA and then look at your paperwork. So you need to have your paperwork in order to show that here's the wages that you drew, here's your business. You probably need to show your tax returns, your financials, what you paid yourself, and then submit that. But you go through the original process first, and then you'll go through the PUA. It's just, again, there's Pennsylvania, you can't apply yet because they're not certain exactly what paperwork they need and how they're going to handle the application for that process. And that's what we're still waiting on from Pennsylvania. It's only been 2 weeks, so, you know, they'll probably take a little longer to do that. You know, although they should have had it done last week. So I said so, and then, like I said, right now though, we still don't have an answer from Pennsylvania on that. And that's probably the most important out of all of it for a lot of the business owners. Are there any other questions?
Robin, I don't know if you got this one, but it said when you apply online, should we reapply as an initial claim?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, if we mean reapply, what, that you were on it before or that you've been trying to get in?
I think that's what it is. They're trying to do it, but they can't do it biweekly with no PIN. I guess, I
Right.
don't know. The question's a little.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say I think you just keep trying. It's still an initial claim because you haven't been approved.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's.
Right. Your understanding of it.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that you would just keep filing initial because it is still initial claim because they never give you your PIN to be able to file. And again, that's some of the glitches that they haven't addressed yet. But without a PIN, you can't, you're not, to my knowledge, you're not official with unemployment until you get the PIN number, because you have to have your PIN number to qualify to check on your unemployment benefits. And question, okay, applied for regular unemployment as a business owner, LLC, pay yourself outside of payroll. Yeah, I mean, and again, this is how I'm reading it. Pennsylvania hasn't come up with the rules yet. But how I read it under the federal standards, that they look at your W-2, they look at your payroll. They want to look at, you have to show that you are actually drawing pay so they can calculate your unemployment amount. So that might be that you pay yourself outside the payroll, but you need to issue, and that's how I'm reading it. Again, Pennsylvania might come up with different, and we just have nothing yet. But how I read the CARES Act and what they're suggesting is you need to pay yourself as part of a payroll. Like I'm a sole proprietor. So I don't even know, I'm not even LLC, so I can't qualify. Because again, my business pays for everything. So I said, I no longer qualify. I wouldn't qualify for the unemployment because I don't pay myself anything. So I would think, and again, if you have, it depends on what Pennsylvania comes up with on whether or not, or if you have record on how you pay yourself, although it's outside of payroll. Do you issue yourself, when you pay yourself, do you, obviously, do you issue yourself any type of W-2 or 1099, which wouldn't be a 1099, or a W-2? And if not, that might be a problem. Again, we're just waiting to hear from Pennsylvania. So, any other?
You went through all the questions. Yeah, I guess a lot of the questions were PPP, and then we did answer some questions about the banquets are, bringing people back. How are we going to work on that?
Yeah, and just the backlog, like I said, in the office, which I wish I could tell you how to get around it. And I can't. They are just so backed up.
And I think you have been covering this about the CARES Act and providing unemployment for self-employed. On a federal level, they have some guidelines, but on a state level, we're not sure. Is that where we're going?
That's correct. Yeah, right. The federal government, they've issued some basic guidelines on what they expect the states to do, including the retroactivity and the categories that will now qualify. So they're telling the states, look, we know that you usually didn't pay unemployment to these categories. However, this is what we want you to do. They just didn't quite tell them how to do it, except for that they can't, that they have to go through the normal first, the categories, and they do discuss about, they do say about, that you have to have been otherwise, like a paid employee under your business. So you had to have drawn a paycheck. I mean, that is one thing that they put in there, but that's it. They left it very broad for the states to interpret. And that's what's causing a lot of the confusion. And I said, Bernadette was asking about the stimulus as well. about paying yourself. And are you talking about the loans, the CARE Act loans, about the stimulus? You know, like I said, and I think we addressed, and I know that the PRLA's addressed several webinars on the stimulus package, on the payback, on the forgiveness loans, as well as applying for the SBA loans. And I know they're backed up right now. The money's been approved in a lot of the SBA loans. It just, they haven't distributed yet because their systems can't handle their systems can't handle the traffic. So that's been a lot of the problem, you know, about getting some of that money dispersed. But like I said, the paycheck, I think, like I said, we talked to Melissa and said there's been a lot of the you know, seminars on that already. We touched on it about some of the ways to have the forgiveness so you don't have to pay that balloon payment back in 3 years, just in case you have to take that amount out. Like I said, but they're backed up on that too. But as you know, you might qualify as having your own business for the short-term loans. It's just a matter of the qualification. You know, if you can get the loan approved. I think they're putting another $250 billion into the SBA program because they're getting inundated with people applying for the loans. So I heard that yesterday. They're putting more money into it. It's just a matter of now getting it dispersed. Now, are there any other questions?
No, I mean, it looks like we may have stopped. So,
Is there any special?
oh wait, here we go. Once we receive the PPP, yeah.
Any special process for bringing employees back? Really, I would say there's no special process. It's just whether or not, if they start lifting the restrictions and you have work, like I said, you have a restaurant owner, if you can deliver somehow, you can say, look, I need you to come back to work. It's really not a special process as long as, you know, you're not making them violate the quarantine or any of the state law regulations. If you can bring them back to work, then, you know, they have to come back. You know, again, as long as you also provide the safe environment. I think they're now requiring everyone, you know, to do the safety protocols while you're in the, you know, in the employment, you know, the safe distancing, masks, etc. But once you can provide all that and call them back, there's really no special process.
So we still need to bring them back by May 5th, either way, even if they sit at home.
And well, if they sit, again, you're bringing them back to work, and that May 5th might extend. And I said, and that part I'm not certain of because I've seen different dates on bringing people back. They said you have that 8-week period, and I think that might expand because they keep expanding this quarantine. So that date might change. And Melissa, do you have any information on that? I don't think they need to sit at home. They actually need to like work unless you have them doing something.
No, they don't need to work actually. They just back on payroll. And and that's something, and to clarify, I mean, restaurants are considered essential businesses. So if you're approved for the loan, you get the P3, you're allowed to bring your employees back. Because as we were saying, the goal of the P3 is to get them off of unemployment. Now, I don't want to go off topic, but it wasn't our update yesterday, and I want to warn everybody now. The initial understanding and what we believe was the intent of the P3 was to allow you to pick the 8-week period that you apply the loan to prove that you've met the requirements of the loan. That's why we were saying apply for it so you can get the money, because they're probably going to run out of money if they don't refund it. But apply it and then wait until that May 5th date to use it, so you're as close to being at a point where you're actually bringing people back to work as opposed to you still being shut down because of in-house dining being shut down. The Treasury has changed that interpretation, and it's going to be a huge concern for us. We're doing a grassroots call today for all of you. They have since said, upon you being approved for the loan and the loan being funded, you need to draw on it within 10 days. So we have lost, it seems, that you pick the 8-week period, you have to draw on the money within 10 days. So that's something that we're working through right now. So this was in the update yesterday. We will be providing more information. We think that Treasury's interpretation is different than the intent of the law, but that's something to keep in mind as well.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, I was not, again, for this presentation, I was focusing more on the unemployment side.
You're fine. The P3 is all my wheelhouse.
Okay. I was updating on it, and like I said, that's what I could see it kept changing, and I wasn't, like I said, up to date on the changes, you know, on how they were interpreting it. And I think it's going to keep changing. Like I said, because it looks like now as they were trying to extend, I think they're extending things, but then it also appears that they're trying to get, you know, trying to take care of the quarantine, you know, get people off the social distancing more and get back to work too. So right now, a lot of things seem to be in flux. So I think a lot of things will be changing. And here's another question on the forgiveness. We only have staffing up to 70% by the end of June for forgiveness, though. Okay, Melissa, I'm going to hand this to you.
This webinar is going off the rails.
That's okay. If we can answer questions.
Yeah, so the goal is to have your staff up to, there's 2 standards you need to meet that we are still, again, this is the name of the phrase of the day. We're still waiting for clarification. We don't have all the answers yet. There's 2 standards that need to be met. You have to get back to your full-time equivalent that you had at that time last year. You don't need to start the 8 weeks with your full-time equivalent employees, but you have to end it within that range. And then you can't have employees being paid 25% less than they were the year before. So you can reduce some salaries, but you can't reduce them significantly. So those are 2 standards that need to be met for loan forgiveness. With that being said, again, the Treasury has a lot of wiggle room here. So while the number is 75%, we are trying to get that number down to maybe 50 or 60%, recognizing that it is unrealistic to expect you to bring back your full staff when you don't know when you're going to be open. And those funds could absolutely be used for rent or other items that are probably taking up a lot of your cash flow right now as it is. So that's a conversation we're having with the Treasury to try and bring that 70-75% down a little lower so you can use some of those funds for other things.
Okay, and that sounds like, so that's what I was, again, trying to brush up on and reading that yesterday. And so hopefully, do they think, Melissa, that have they made any moves to budge on that yet or no?
The Treasury is authorized to make that decision. They have not yet.
Okay.
The Senate was back yesterday, and that was supposed to be when we would get more funding for the P3 to either extend it and or provide more funding, and that got stuck. So they didn't move on it. So we're in a bit of limbo now, waiting for that unanimous consent vote to get more funding. But it is within the power of the Treasury to change their preliminary 75% number and lower it. So that's the conversations we're having now.
Good. Like I said, and hopefully they will. Like I said, I saw something in the Wall Street Journal this morning where more money got approved into the general program, but I don't think it was the forgiveness. I think it was just the loans and something in general. They approved another $250 billion, or that was proposed that they want to put into it. That's probably where it got stuck, like you said, on the percentages. So are there any other questions? Give it a minute. Or does anyone want to just chime in on the discussion? You can unmute and talk.
I think Melissa does need to get off, so we won't be covering any more of the PPP questions. And if you have questions like that, we do have a submit questions feature on our website where you can submit these questions to us, and we will address them each day. We look at these questions and address them and write you back on an email. So And the webinar that Melissa did on Wednesday did cover a lot about the PPP and about the EIDL. So please take a look on our website for that archived webinar so that you can take a look at it might have some of the answers you're looking for too prior to submitting questions. Robin, thank you so much for getting on this webinar with us. We really appreciate you presenting this information.
Oh,
And thank you to everybody that got on the call with us. We hope that the information was useful to you. And that being, yeah, Robin, did you have anything you wanted to conclude with?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank everyone. Like you said, thank you for having me and to present it. If anyone has any questions or if you can think of anything, feel free to, you can give me a call directly if you wish. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
We will be sending a recording of this webinar out to everybody that has signed up for it, and Robin's information, contact information will be available through the webinar, the recording that we send out.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Be safe and have a nice weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Robin. Thank you.
Bye.